and he stuck a banana, an actual banana, with silver tape on the wall, and walked away. Somebody paid $100,000 and then sold, and somebody paid $300,000, and next thing you know, he was in the Guggenheim.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your hosts, myself, Tim Bickmore, and my two partners, Dan Weiss and Nathaniel Leach. And today we have a guest, Jônatas Chimen. We're so excited to talk to Jônatas because he is going to speak about fine art and the dealing of fine art and the galleries and different things and the business of fine art in all reality. So Jônatas, we were really excited to have you. Before we get started, I'm just going to get our listeners up to speed on who you are. So I'm going to read this nice bio you put together and we'll go from there. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. All right. Jônatas Chimen, or simply Jônatas, is a Brazilian-American symbolist artist, author, academic, and public speaker. His work explores personal and collective identity amidst an ever-changing cultural landscape. The artist's exploration of identity is often drawn from his own family's history of migration, adaptation, and the cultural hybridization. Jônatas' art is process-based, ranging in technique from traditional Spanish realism to multimedia approaches in 2D, 3D, and time-based formats. Jônatas often makes use of pastiche of immigration documents, DNA exams, inquisitional archives, and personal diaries. Overall, his message of embracing one's cultural identity and disclosing personal beliefs is a recurring theme in his art. For the past 18 years, Jônatas has been featured by biennials, museums, art galleries, and art auctions. Jônatas holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Latin America, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies from the University of Madison, Wisconsin, and a Master's of Fine Arts degree from Florida International University. Jônatas is the founder of Jada Art Movement. Jônatas, what a wonderful bio. So excited to talk to you. There's words in there that I had to look up to make sure I knew what was going on. So you know my knowledge when it comes to fine art, but I'm excited to learn about it. And I'm gonna have Dan start us off with some questions.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Jônatas, thank you for joining us. We know how busy you are. As you were mentioning before this podcast, you've got 9 paintings to complete over the next 2 weeks. Currently you're in Miami, which you split your time between Miami and in Paris, right? And then you're on a plane to get back to Paris.
Oh yes, that's happening. April 1st, I must be in Paris. There are other things going on, and it's important. But before I do that, I gotta finish these 9 paintings, and it's been a pain, but it's what I love doing.
And a lot of people appreciate that, and we appreciate you. And so the audience knows Jônatas has been a friend of mine for a long time.
Oh yes.
And actually, I decided today to do my recording here in part of my house that displays one of the number of actual pieces that I have from you, which would be right there, including Jônatas also did, which I so very, very much appreciate, my wife and my ketubah when we got married years ago too. So among our collection of what you have. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll start out, brother. Just if you can talk to the listeners a little bit about, we work with a lot of creatives, a little bit about what the inspiration for creating your art looks like, and for teaching it as well.
Sure. Okay, so the inspiration, that's a huge, it's a big question, right? If you have to speak your truth, and everybody's talking about speaking your truth. Everybody's talking about that. But in art, you simply cannot build a career on art if you don't speak your truth. the things that move you, you must do. I was a few years ago at the University of Wisconsin as a guest, and I was speaking. I was having an exhibition there, and somebody asked me, "But why do you make this specific kind of painting?" Brother Dan, it's kind of like the painting behind you, which is a nude woman. As you know, we live in a society where some subjects have become taboo, especially if you are a male painting women, which is what I do mostly. And I said, the reason why I have to do paintings, make paintings such as this one, is because I simply love the human form. I just do, and there's no better answer to that. There's no lofty intellectual way to rationalize this. I simply like the human form. I like old people, I just love the wrinkles. Sometimes a younger person, sometimes a female will be painted as well. And that's it. That's as simple as that. So when it comes to inspiration, I am inspired by heritage quite a lot. As when Tim read my biography, it speaks a lot about painting or creating art with fragments of immigration documents that goes, back to Inquisition times, where my family came from in Spain. I enjoy that. I'm a first generation immigrant, and I like to know. I engaged in the journey of finding out who I am, and that inspired me enough to create art. So that's another kind of art form. So you have to go where your interests are, and you have to be true to yourself. That's the only way to do it.
And how about teaching it? What has driven you to spend so many years now teaching others to find that same inspiration, which of
So,
course looks very different for them?
of course. Here's the thing. And right now I'm a college professor, and one of the thing is the power of education. What a good professor, a good instructor, a good teacher can do. The difference you can bring to the life of a student. And I was very lucky to meet uh, a few professors, instructors, teachers who really made a huge difference in my life. The painting that's behind you, for instance, brother Dan, that painting, I didn't use any brushes to make that
Mhm.
painting. That painting was done with my bare hands and a piece of fabric. And that is a technique that was popularized by Da Vinci, which is called the rubbing off technique. And basically, you cover the entire canvas on with three colors, which becomes a sepia, a brown sepia tone. And then you look at the subject, somebody sitting in front of you or an object, and you start wiping off paint. And the white that you see there is the color of the canvas. So
Mhm.
you have to do this very quickly before the paint dries, but you're sculpting, you're digging out the light, and that way you create volume. Now, how did I learn that? I was lucky enough to meet one lady, an old lady, in the city of Weston in South Florida, and she studied at the same time in the same place as Pablo Picasso and Salvador Dali. One person who was able to bring to me the knowledge that she had acquired over a career that lasted over 60 years, and within 5 years she was able to give me this kind of knowledge that changed my life. As you know, I went to graduate school for art. Did they teach me any of that? Not at all. But a neighborhood art school taught me so much more when it comes to making art than that. And I owe everything I know of art making to this lady, Conchita Fergal. So I wanted to be this kind of teacher, professor, guide. uh, so this day, what guides me are two things. One, if you are an artist, I want you to know that it's possible to make a living as an artist. Now you're gonna have to work really hard, but it's possible. Number two, I want you to know that there are narratives of artists who have succeeded, who have led dignified lives, who are able to essentially pay their bills and raise families. Now, they were not just artists. There were people who knew how to connect point A with point B and make sales and network and all kinds of things. So I try to teach those examples. I very much criticize postmodernism because it teaches people basically how to fail as artists. I take them out of the white cube, which is what you call the gallery or the art studio. I take them out of the white cube and I tell them, get out there and make art in a way that you can show yourself. let people admire and give them the option to strike a conversation with you, which might result in creating a collector. So every time I make a sale, I actually show my students how much I made so that they understand that it's possible. At the same time, I tell them, pretending to be an artist, dressing up cool like an artist, growing a cool hipster beard, that's not enough. You need to spend time in the studio. You need to learn from role models who will make a difference in your life. The hand-eye coordination is incredibly important. So you have to be well-rounded. Again, we go back to Da Vinci, the Renaissance man, right? You have to be able to combine different elements, a 360-degree kind of work, in order to be successful as an artist. So as a teacher, as a professor, I usually take my students by the hand and I lead them towards that kind of a reality in which they have a good artist statement, a well-presentable website, where they have a presence on social media and all kinds of things, so that then eventually they can get gallery representation and all kinds of things. I don't always succeed at doing that, but I try my very best.
Thank you for that insight. I've followed obviously your work for years, and I've seen I've seen the pieces, the series that you have done, and as you mentioned, I mean, I think your past, I can see your past and knowing your past in the majority, if not the entirety of your work, and you have done a lot with immigration and speaking to that journey for you too, and Jônatas and I are both Freemasons, and that's where we met. And we're not just Freemasons, we're Jewish Freemasons, which is not as common. So I know you've done pieces where it has brought in Freemasonry into the art.
Sure.
And you've obviously done a lot of pieces that bring in your Jewish culture, which is a very different Jewish culture than mine. You mentioned like the Inquisition, and of course, right, your family heritage fleeing the Iberian Peninsula to make themselves to Brazil eventually, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those, there's so much of your voice and your feeling that goes into these pieces. Could you share with the audience a little bit more about that voice and the emotions that get interjected into your work, and what the messages that you want coming out of it to look like?
So here's the thing. There is no way that you can make art, truly make art. I don't mean creating compositions of a visual nature. I mean engaging in the making of art to the point that the essence of your being is distilled and becomes medium. If you're going to do that, you will need some opportunities for introspection. If we go back and we take a look at what the ancients have done in order to achieve that, they would have what you call a memento mori. This is very common amongst people in the literatures, which is essentially some skulls, some bones, and even some, clock, a sand clock that will show you don't have all the time in the world in this life. You expire. You don't last forever. You're made of flesh, and you will go back to the dust where you came from. So this kind of memento mori, that's the name that it has been given. It has existed since times immemorial. And it teaches you a very important lesson, a lesson about urgency. The urgency to live the here and the now, and to do something meaningful with your existence. That in itself is what makes me want to give the very best of myself, because I know that in all likelihood, my work will outlive me. Once I'm gone, the Jônatas that the world will know is the one that's hanging on walls or in written form or whatever it is that I produce and I leave behind. If that is the case, then I have to be very careful about what I actually leave behind. Tomorrow, God willing, I have a child and then grandchildren. They will look up, those works to find their ancestors' voice, like I have done via immigration documents and photographs that I have found, and all kinds of things. So I believe that my exercise of trying to find myself by studying my own genealogy and going back to archives where I saw people being tortured for their creed, for their heritage, it has made me realize that it's very important to curate what I leave behind. So that's what I do in my paintings. As a Freemason, as somebody of the Jewish faith, as a Brazilian man, as an immigrant, as a naturalized American, as whatever it is that I represent, all kinds of flags, I have to be very careful. At the same time, I have to enjoy it. I don't represent all those flags. I have to be myself. So as long as I can use the distilled aspect of myself in my art, I'm being successful. And that's what I try. That's what I try.
Jônatas, to kind of follow up on that question, how it sounds like, I mean, based off that the comments you just made, you put a lot of time and effort in the curation of what you're going to put out that will outlive you.
Yeah.
But have you found it to be hard to create those types of pieces when yourself may be evolving through time, and then looking back and being like, "Ooh, that wasn't Jônatas anymore."
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that I would have maybe want to put it at that point, but now I don't know that I wanted to put it out. How do you kind of deal with that, I guess?
Well, you deal with the acceptance of growth, the acceptance of evolution, and you date your works, and that is the Jônatas of 2012. That is the Jônatas of 2016. And you keep doing that. And here's the thing, that's why I like to create narrative-based works. All of my works are narrative-based. There's a story behind them. And usually when I create a collection, I don't create a one-off piece. Like the piece that Dan has behind him, that's one out of a number of pieces that follow the same color pattern and composition. They're part of a series. So I try to write at least from one page to several pages, sometimes a booklet, about what is inspiring me to create that. What's going on in my life? What is inspiring me? That way it becomes locked in time, and it allows me to let go of that. It gives me the permission, because I exhausted that time period, that moment. Again, carpe diem, right? Seize the day. Seize that moment. Finish that moment. Have nothing else left behind, so you have no angst to go back. And then as you move forward, you don't look back. And that's it.
That's all very fascinating, Jônatas.
Thank you, Nathaniel.
So for my questions, I'd like to transition more towards the financial aspect.
Sure. Very important.
That's really my ball game. So I'll readily admit I don't have a creative bone in my body. I could
challenge that, but I'll take your word.
But that's okay, because my wife is the one with the creative side, so I lean heavily upon her. So combined, I think that we're quite good together.
Powerful couple. Yes.
So that being said, in my line of work, it's very hard for me to wrap my head around how to monetarily, financially value art. So when we hear things about, I don't even know if this counts as your definition of art, but like something recently came out about these NFTs or non-fungible tokens.
And yes.
One was sold for $69 million recently.
Yes, it was.
That blows my mind.
Yes.
So perhaps you could speak to my first question and then also address, if anything, if you have an opinion on NFTs or anything that's kind of coming up in the art world where value is being assigned, and why is value being assigned to such things for people like me who have such a hard time understanding that.
Yeah. So when it comes to, and I'll start, if you don't mind me, I'll start from the last question, the NFTs, and then work my way towards the more, the bigger concept of valuing art, in a more classic way. So
Please do.
NFTs, they are simply novel as of right now. And also, what's really valued about NFTs is that nobody else can have a copy of that. It's just not going to be available. So it's about scarcity. You're selling the scarcity and the novelty. That's all that is. It's not about the quality. It's not about what's behind. It's not about the composition, the quality, or anything like that. It's about, first of all, a novel concept. The first ones are going to be greatly valued simply because there's something new and there's a story to tell. I got this one, and this is the first NFT of this country, this society, this artist. Anybody who's an artist who is a very traditional, who's painting, brush, and canvases, if that person is well known and he or she comes up with an NFT, the price will most likely be very high because that will be the first NFT by that artist, let's say. So the collector's base will really jump into that. So novelty, scarcity, that's the concept of Andy Warhol's, let's say, a pop art, right? If you can, he used to make fun of the fact that people are very silly and they will buy anything that looks shiny and cool. And that is true, unfortunately or fortunately. The thing is this. Some people are looking for the next thrill, and the NFTs is simply that. You probably saw how in 2 years ago for Miami Art Week, there was a banana sold that was stuck on a wall with a piece of tape. Did anybody here see that? No? So let me introduce you to that.
I might have heard something about that. Yeah. Please, yes.
Okay, so let me introduce you to that. In Miami, you have the most important week for artists called Miami Art Week, also known as Miami Art Basel Week. Art Basel is a franchise that travels around some of the main cities around the world, and they have an art fair. It's a commercial art fair. In Miami, it's the time when all of the cool people come out, right? It gives you the permission to dress up, flamboyantly and be cool, and it's all about the after parties. It's very little about the art. People, unfortunately, will go in front of your paintings and take a selfie covering the painting, which is very annoying. So people have been, doing things like that. And something that happened was this one artist had a booth at Miami Art Basel, which is one of the fairs of Miami Art Week. It's incredibly expensive to have a booth there. Very few people can have. And he rented a huge space, and he stuck a banana, an actual banana, with silver tape on the wall, and walked away. Well, let me make a long story short. That banana is today hanging in the Guggenheim. So now, in the contract, it says that for perpetuity, the Guggenheim has to change the banana every day for perpetuity. And then there's this very specific set of instructions on how to place the tape, how to place the banana, what kind of banana, and all kinds of things. Okay? So before getting to the Guggenheim, a private buyer bought it. And I believe he paid $300,000, or actually somebody paid $100,000 and then sold, and somebody paid $300,000. And next thing you know, it was in the Guggenheim. So why? It's novel. It's different. It makes history. It simply makes history. You want to be the first one to buy that one piece that will enter the history books. You probably have seen the restorations that have been botched in Europe of very important frescoes. There's this one old lady, and I don't mean old as in ageism, but she's a very, very frail lady who is not an artist or not a professional art restorer, and she offered to restore this very old, important fresco of Jesus. And she painted, and without, I don't lack any disrespect towards my Jewish brother, Jesus Christ. But I'll tell you, it ended up looking like a monkey. But I'm not a well-drawn monkey. a cartoon monkey. Like imagine a monkey from, I don't know, SpongeBob or Dora the Explorer. I mean, it was so clearly botched. Now she had the intention to do a good job, but now that fresco is priceless because it became a meme. It's everywhere on coffee mugs and t-shirts, and it's a very valuable piece of art. Why? Because it made the news in such a way. And there are many other botched pieces of art that have made the news as well. So in the case of the NFTs, there's no intrinsic value. It's not a precious metal. It's not, precious stone. It's just novelty. And the very first ones are going to be very pricey. It also begs the question of authorship. It begs the question. There are many nuances within the concept of making art. Something that only exists in the digital world, made of zeros and ones. All kinds of things. It begs the question about authorship. What if you have the assistance of AI? Is it still art? What if it was made, by someone who just received the instructions, and you're not a professional NFT artist? So all kinds of things that are very important that will now become subject for important and meaningful discussion. So these pieces are going to be very valuable, and that's it. So that's a warning for collectors. If you want to make a boundless amount of money, then you might want to start looking for the novel, because it will make a lot of money.
Jônatas, you have fundamentally shifted my analytical mindset when it comes to analyzing art. No joke. I'm not joking when I say that. Well, there's some part of it's facetiousness. I'm not gonna lie. So when you say art has value simply because it makes history, and when you said that, a number of thoughts immediately crystallized within my mind about, holy shit, you're right.
Yeah.
It is about what society places a value upon it.
Yes.
And then it feeds from there.
Yeah.
That's just.
Yeah. And we're living in the meme world, right? We're living in meme culture, right? So the concept of repeating something and recontextualizing, and once you say that this is something of great value, it acquires a conceptual amount of value, a lot like perhaps Bitcoin and kinds of ideas. There's a lot of hype that becomes tangible value.
Jônatas, I have a question, kind of on this topic.
Okay.
I'm a big econ guy, and I like to read just different macroeconomic theories and different things. And there's one professor who I enjoy his books, by Robert Shiller, and so he's written Irrational Exuberance. But most recently, I think it was 2015 is when he released, maybe 2016, one of his newer books called Narrative Economics. And the theory behind that book is really to promote that the narrative needs to be taken into consideration to understand market bubbles, markets ups and downs. And he kind of provides a framework behind how to kind of understand that. Have you ever taught narrative economics to your art classes to understand how they can monetarily or monetize their artwork, in the sense of how do you create the buzz, the drum around monetizing a piece? Or does it just kind of happen and it's the one out of a million that gets that one meme that pushes it forward? Is there ways to structurally framework narratives into your art pieces?
So very good question. First of all, I haven't taught specifically narrative economics. Not the book, not in a way that we follow this structure, but I do teach that in the sense that it's a proven method that financial success can be achieved by artists if they know how to direct the narrative at the macro level. So here's the thing. The question is this. There are many tangents where we can go here. Number one, the idea of the meme culture, fad, the bubbles and all that. Everything can be guided by hype. And if you go to markets such as the European markets, if you go to places where they're more traditional, they have a longer history of dealing with art, the same will not happen. It's an American phenomenon that you can come out of nowhere and, one, call yourself an artist. Two, your art will grow in value in a way that is not explainable rationally. So that is an American phenomenon, and that is both good and bad. So it is good because, again, it's part of the American dream where anything is possible. And it's bad because it does not reward, I will sound like a purist, and perhaps I am, but it does not reward good art or the better kind of art. Because that is, first of all, I understand that's very subjective, but it does not reward skill or depth of content. It rewards often the hype, the novelty, as we were just talking about. Now, it also promotes inventiveness, which is, again, a very American value, which is beautiful and important. So we simply are part of a society that is just insane, and the world is always baffled, and they criticize us, but they also want to be part of us. They also want to be part of this mess of the party, you know? So here's the thing. What I teach my students, which is true, if you observe the greatest names in the art world who were able to make a living as artists during their lifetime, right? Of course, they were very much aware of the fact that they can maneuver they can project a voice that will be taken in a certain way. So they created a mystique around their personalities, their names, and that way, to the best of their efforts, they would try to direct the narrative in a way that the outcome would be financial success. So you take somebody such as Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso, for instance, he liked to be called the Minotaur. Now, the Minotaur, as we know, is a mythological creature that is half bull and half human. And one of the reasons why the Minotaur was placed in a labyrinth was because the Minotaur could not rest until he ate human flesh. And the kind of flesh that he liked the most was the flesh of virgins. Now, why would Picasso call himself the Minotaur? One, he was from Malaga, where bullfighting is very important. So the picture of the bull is very powerful and very important. Stocky creature, that's what Picasso looked like, a stocky man, short, from Malaga. Second, he was very much into, for him to start a new collection, he needed to start a new romance in his life. So he always went after young women, and he was basically saying, the reason why I am this man is because I am a Minotaur. I'm always hungry for a new romance, to eat new flesh of virgins. And that way he was justifying the way he was acting. And because he was justifying, he would act even in a more, let's say, image-ready way. He was always image-ready, you know, wearing his striped shirts and always with a very beautiful woman next to him. And he would switch the woman over and over and over to promote this idea that he's the Minotaur. So everybody wants to know, hey, maybe we should have him in a movie. And that's the same thing with Salvador Dali, same thing with Frida Kahlo, same thing with Andy Warhol and Keith Haring. And all those people did not live in poverty as artists. They were not just people who could paint well or sculpt well. They were also business people who were very much aware of marketing and of projected image. So nowadays, we have social media. What would Picasso do with Instagram? What would Andy Warhol do with Zoom and YouTube? I don't know. I know.
My mind just exploded again. Wow. Just to think about the possibilities.
Yeah.
So I actually have a follow-up to that. Could maybe I shouldn't even ask this, but do you have some mysterious thing that you got going on? That is that
you
got
something? Won't be mysterious anymore.
I know. I'm torn. If you don't want to share, I totally understand.
No. Listen, I can tell you. Yes, of course. I don't leave the house without a suit. I don't, and that's been the case for several years, for more than a decade. And people know me that, that way. They know it's the guy on a suit. And if I'm painting live at any time, I'm always painting on a suit. And yeah, and every suit of mine is often stained with paint, but it's a brand. And I'm very careful about the colors I wear and the sense of style, and I have to be. And people know me as that, somebody who's careful about how he dresses. And I'm not specifically better at dressing up or anything like that, but it's just something that I try to repeat to stay in people's minds. I also have my own mythological or mythology, let's put it that way. There's one artist, his name is Joseph Beuys, performance artist who was a postmodernist, and he created a narrative that he was fighting World War II. He was hit by the Russians. His plane fell. He was a pilot, fell, and he was rescued by Tartars, people, the natives of the icy areas of Russia. And he says that he died basically, and they were able to resurrect him by wrapping him in animal fat and flannel. And he swears that's the case. And that's a narrative that goes back to a very simple book, The Journey of the Hero, by Joseph Campbell. And he has been repeating this over and over and over, and there's no proof that this is true. And a lot of artists are told that you should come up with your own history of the journey of the hero. And then you start engaging this kind of simplification of your narrative. You see what I mean? So my immigration narrative is fuel for my own art making. But how much of that is actually a construct of mine? Yes, I did come from Brazil. Yes, I did come from, I grew up in a certain way. I come from a background that dealt with the Inquisition. But how much did that influence directly my art? I would say that subliminally, quite a lot. But the way I create my narrative is as if there was a linear connection to all that. And that's simply not true. That's simply not true. But I know that by engaging so much in the study of DNA, in the study of documents, I have constructed a narrative that seems much more linear than it actually is. But then it begs the question: if I believe that, if that is my belief, isn't that my narrative?
Don't you just create your own reality?
And
that's the question is, and what is reality? And then that is kind of an artistic.
It's metaphysical now.
Yes. I love that.
And I also can attest it too. Jônatas, you've never mentioned that whole suit thing to me. And so it's interesting how some of these messages, just like a lot of art in general, right? They're hidden behind something. And now that I think about it for the first time ever, I can't think of a time in years that I've seen you where we've spent time publicly. Okay, sure, if we're at your home or whatever, you may not be wearing a suit. But when I've been out in public with you for years, you're right. I can't think of a time that you were not wearing a suit. In fact, I know of one series that you actually painted yourself. That might be the only time you've ever done that. You painted yourself, and you painted yourself in a blue suit, if I remember correctly.
Sure.
Time to upgrade your wardrobe, Dan.
You don't have to.
I know who to go to for fashion advice, but clearly I've never gone to that.
I can't point you out to the people I learned from, but no. It's just something that it's also a simplification of your image. It's just easy, right? You kind of have a uniform. That's it. You don't have to think much about it.
That's fascinating. So I'd like to now switch tacks a little bit and touch on one other aspect of the art world when it comes to the finances. So can you speak at all to, if any experience for yourself, or perhaps of others, when it comes to what goes into running and owning an art gallery.
If you own an art gallery, you're usually in big trouble if you expect people to pass by, come in and buy the artwork. That's not how you pay your bills, and that's not how you make it. The best kinds of art galleries, and unfortunately I have seen many gallery owners who believe that it's all about getting a gallery, perhaps in a place, in an environment where there's a lot of art buyers and other art galleries, and having your art gallery there and having amazing artwork on the wall, and just waiting for the customer to walk by and buy something. So here's the thing. The way that an art gallery should function, you always have to go back to the methods that have been tried and have worked. You have to represent a handful of artists. You have to be known for a certain style. If you're all over the place, it doesn't work. And that gallery owner has to go after the opportunity to make sales. In other words, fundraisers are very important. How can that gallery directly place that artist in an opportunity to be represented and to be the sole artist of an event that's for a gala, for a certain organization, for a certain fundraising function? That is the kinds of galleries that will find the buyer and say, I know this buyer who I've been selling for the past 30 years, 20 years, 15 years. I believe I should introduce this buyer to this artist because he or she enjoys this kind of artwork. So you have to be somebody who has your heart and soul in the running of an art gallery as an agent, much more than somebody who has rented a space in a building, a storefront. That won't work. The other thing you have to do as an art gallery, as well as an artist, you have to educate your audience. You have to place your artist in opportunities to speak. So the art gallery has to contact newspapers and magazines in order for press releases to happen, so that the voices of those artists are projected, and then it reaches people who are going to come back to the gallery. Again, it's not about sitting down and opening the doors and waiting for people to come in. Never, ever. You have to also direct your artists. Your artists will have lots of issues. A lot of them will have some unhealthy habits, not sleeping enough, maybe, having habits that are not going to promote healthy artistic production. The best kind of collectible art, for instance, is the kind of art that happens in a series. The vast majority of artists who did well, if they were inspired by, let's say, a certain landscape or any theme, women, faith, nature, technology, whatever it is, they have, whenever they made the first painting or drawing or sculpture or whatever it is, they had already in mind the next 30 paintings or at least 20 paintings that will fit within that series. The production of series will incentivize collectors to buy more than one painting, and it will create an internal fighting amongst collectors. And they'll be going after those works for the next decade or so, or lifetime, to try to get them. And that's what drives price up. Again, it's scarcity and letting people know that it's available and it's not for everybody. Also, pricing it correctly. Selling art for a too affordable of a price will make sure your artwork or the people who you represent as a gallery will never acquire actual value. Again, you're in the business, you are in the luxury business, which a lot of artists don't want to accept, and that's to their detriment, to the detriment of their careers. Buying art should be like buying a diamond ring, like buying a Ferrari. Now, you don't have to be snobbish about it. You should be somebody approachable, and you should make sure you have collections that will be able to be purchased by a new collector, perhaps a college student, something that is not a painting, but a sketch. And if you're going to become a collector, you can buy that for maybe a couple $100s. And then as you buy and sell and resell and keep buying, you will be able, as you develop your own career, as a buyer, you'll be able to afford the paintings. So you have to have a long-term a plan. You have to create your own farm, your own people who you're going to nurture for the next decades, so that they can become those people who are going to come back and buy for a lot of money. I've had this new collectors initiative where I would make quick sketches and offer them for $50. Those people have come back. Some of them have come back and actually bought paintings because now they actually have real jobs and they have been able to save a little bit.
Again, I had no idea. It's amazing what you learn in these things.
Nathaniel, you know what Jônatas does? That explanation reminded me of Disney. It reminded me of Disney.
We're going to get to that. Save it for the end.
Okay, we're going to save it for the end. But anyways, that's all I could think about. So Jônatas, I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
To kind of round us up for the night. And right. I'm just going to be straight with this one because I don't really know what it is. So I'm ready to be educated. But
okay.
What is metamodernism?
We are what we call Jada, J-A-D-A. Does not stand for anything. The closest thing is we are the juxtaposition of Dada. Dada represents postmodernism as an art movement. Now, postmodernism is something very important. However, I believe that it's time to move past postmodernism. In other words, to go towards postmodernism. And instead of having to say postmodernism, there's a new word called metamodernism. So if you think that since the end of World War II, the world challenged the notion of grand narratives and also of instruction and structure. The world was very much shattered when it realized, we all realized, people, contemporary individuals at that time, they realized that the nation with the most number of PhD holders, scholars, was a nation that caused the greatest genocide of human history, at least recorded human history, Germany, right? And that's not to blame Germany or the everyday Germans, but that is a fact. And at the same time, a lot of things would happen around that time. The understanding that scholarship will create better humans was simply debunked at that time. The idea is, yes, you can learn the assembly line. You can have the fastest machines and production and at the cheapest price. But if you don't work in matters of the heart, if you don't work in the depth of the soul, if your learning is divorced from meaning and the idea of connection with your fellow human, if your teachings are disconnected from understanding the marginalized other with a capital O, then you might be creating very learned people, amongst whom you will find people who are willing to commit genocide. So postmodernism simply said, listen, okay, I understand that these methods have worked and it's important to go to school. It's important to lead a certain life, follow steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what modernism gave us. But right now, I want to try something different because the world that you guys created is not the best world. So let me try something different. And that's how you end up having the hippie movement, the many revolutions at the social level and at the intellectual level that took place in a postmodern world. You know, the idea of like, maybe the family unit doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to be so traditional and all kinds of things. And that did allow the world to consider others' voices as important and that they might be right in one way or another about several subjects. Metamodernism is saying, okay, this was important back then, but now we lost too much structure. We have no structure. A lot of us have no sense of belonging. A lot of us have no narratives to follow because you debunked every grand narrative, every example of heroism, every example of how to build character or how to achieve grandeur has been debunked. You guys have not been preaching these ideas. the lack of the non-industrious individual is a result of postmodernism at an excessive level. And the art world has suffered the most. Postmodernism have not created many successful artists, artistically, intellectually, financially, in all kinds of ways. So postmodernism is saying, yes, you have to spend time in the white cube. You have to spend time honing your skills, but you also have to spend time out there connecting with those who are not part of academia, who are not other artists who think like you, who can belong to your echo chamber. Postmodernism created the echo chamber and intellectualized art to a level that it became something that if you want to be an artist, you better become a professor. So an artist of success, you better become a professor. So metamodernism is the rejection of irony and skepticism, and creating a structure of built via sincerity and connectedness, which is what postmodernism removed from the world.
That is beyond fascinating, and
I'm glad.
Makes a lot of sense. And yeah, there's, I think, like Nathaniel said, there's so much in my head. I could talk to you for hours, Jônatas. I'm not going to lie.
Kicking off our wrap up of this wonderful podcast and jumping around, I guess not the table, but the Zoom. I'll start out with just a thought that was coming to me throughout this conversation. And my thought was really about first motivators, first movers, right? There's a number of first motivators that come to mind, whether that be passion, being moved by passion, or being moved by incentives, which we talk a lot about, incentives being motivators, perhaps morality, but most definitely narratives. We've spent a lot of time today talking about narratives and the power of narratives, which we, the three of us, talk about all the time. And where a lot of that power comes from is that they're very difficult to break, right? They're raw in their nature. Like I wouldn't even actually call money a first motivator, a motivator. But money is a resource to get to whatever that first motivator really is, right? So narratives, how powerful they are. And that's what your career is. That's what art is, right? It's sharing this narrative over and over again. But it's different than, say, like the narrative that Tim or Nathaniel or I share, you know, bringing out the passion of what we do, because that is a moment in time, right? And often disappears, right, from somebody's memory. But the courage that it takes to show your creativity, and it is very courageous, is commendable, because when you speak to your narrative, you put it on a canvas, which means, as you mentioned, it doesn't go away. And I know that there have been times where not everybody's going to love everything that you do, and every artist, right, is going to seek criticism, and it's out. It, you know, it doesn't go away. So to be vulnerable, to allow for that to occur, and the reminder to be constant, it's very courageous. It's a very powerful narrative. And I just thank you for repeatedly sharing that over and over again with us tonight, and then the public in general.
Thank you, my brother, for this opportunity. And vulnerability is one of the key words of metamodernism. Very, very important. And narratives, I just want to say that I never sold one artwork. That's the truth. It's usually narratives that come with, you know, a little gift, which is a painting or something. And so that's what it is. People connect with you via the narratives, and that's it. And they have to be true. They have to be honest.
Yeah, well, Jônatas, I mean, with my final thoughts here for the night, and then I'll pass it over to Nathaniel to finish it up. I always tell people, and I'm very genuine about this, I always wanted to be an artist. I wish I could draw. I wish I could paint. I wish I could do some of those things. I'm not the best at it.
You can.
Yeah, and put a lot of work and a lot of hours, but you know, I would try. But where I feel like I've found my artistic side or my artistic ability is through business. It's through starting LBW, working with Dan and Nathaniel, and it's a different kind of art. It's not a painting necessarily, but to me, and we've talked about this from day one, it's a blank canvas. You can create whatever you so choose. You can paint it in any way that you see fit, but that painting comes through people. It comes through process. It comes through how you interact with the client. People talk about the experience, right? Client experience, and it's very artistic.
Yes.
But very seldom do people explain it in a fashion like that. And I will say a lot of business owners that we find who are really good typically have an art background. They were good musicians. They were some sort of creator. Yes, it's a very interesting correlation. And speaking with you tonight, I'm like, the business, like, I'm like, this needs to be applied to business school, right? Like you need to have artists come in and teach business people about how to think and the persona and taking the holistic picture in dots. And if you really think about it, Steve Jobs, if you're thinking about Jeff Bezos, they have a very unique ability to take ideas and then hone them in to the public that simplifies, but they're art pieces, and the business becomes an art piece. And I feel that way. Maybe I'm not, a purist, I guess, at heart, or I think about it differently, but just talking with you, it was wonderful, and I really appreciate it. And I there's a lot to relate. So Nathaniel, you can go ahead.
You spoke about how artists should think of the long term. They should plan for the long term. This is a long-term investment in a skill set, in how they should create. If they want to create something that can be sold, it's not about creating a product. It's about creating a narrative. Essentially, it is to create you don't want to create one piece. You want to create a series. You have to price it correctly, as if it is a luxury, a scarce good, and you want to create something that collectors can collect.
Yes,
it's so simple yet so true. Given people, it has taught people once again how important it is to be together physically versus over social media. But I can also appreciate your point about using that social media should not enhance and it should not replace human interaction. It should enhance it. It does take the warmth out of the room. It really does. And I'm speaking for myself, cannot wait for the day when I can actually walk into the office and actually see my colleagues' faces. That's a big problem for me, is actually, it's very hard to see somebody's expression. And it has, as everybody noticed when they had to wear masks, it became readily apparent how critical it is to be able to see one's expression. So now I'm very cognizant that when I come up to somebody when I'm wearing a mask, to say hello, I wave.
Yes.
But I can't wait for the day when I don't have to wave and I cannot wait for somebody's expression in person. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
And especially on the investment aspect of art.
I'm so happy. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't think I have ever been invited to be part of an interview with a group that deals with finances and investment and all that. So this is a first for me. So thank you so much, all of you, Team Nathaniel and Brother Dan. Thank you. What a pleasure. I enjoyed very much the conversation.
Well, we really enjoyed having you, Jônatas. So thank you for doing this, brother. We appreciate you, as you put it, allowing us to travel through the art world with you and with your art specifically. We just very much thank you. And we thank our audience as well for being attentive as they typically are, and joining us to hear from another great guest talk about their insight and their successes when it comes to, what they do for a living. So we appreciate just the whole lot of sharing here. And I also, and I hope I'm not speaking out of tune here, but I think it's probably safe to say to the audience that don't expect to see Jônatas doing any work with bananas or Curious George or anything like that. That's just not going to be his cup of tea. Again, not going to happen. Thanks again, Jônatas, and thank you everybody for listening. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently. and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time,